We're going to talk today about if you've ever thought about breeding your pet.
You're watching Midwest Lizard Mom.
I wanted to talk about this subject because when I first got a crested gecko, I thought they're so adorable. And they're so easy to take care of. They're nocturnal, so they're awake at night, and they just live in a very smallish enclosure. 18 by 18 by 24 is recommended for an adult. I wouldn't go any smaller than that, to be honest. You could always go bigger, but you feed them crested gecko diet, and you can feed them bugs as well. So they're pretty easy to take care of, and they're adorable. So I thought to myself, they're so cute. I would just love to have little baby ones and consider breeding one day. And I kind of brought it up on a Facebook group. I can't remember which one it was, but I just mentioned, I was thinking about breeding, and was there anyone who was a breeder that I could talk to about my questions? Just exploring the idea, because whenever I do something, I tend to really look into what the ins and outs are. I like to do research. You might notice that from my channel and the subjects, but I really like to check things out before I just jump in. Somebody gave me some really good advice. They said, get babies first and grow them up. I had not had mine very long. They said, why don't you get some babies, grow them up, and see how you feel about it at that time before you consider breeding more. They said, there's a lot of pluses and minuses to breeding. You have to deal with, for example, if the eggs don't make it, or if you have one that does make it but maybe dies soon after, or maybe has some defects. There's a lot of things you'd want to research in regards to genetics, which I learned about later. So I took her advice, and I said, it's a good point. I'm really in the honeymoon phase of owning them. They're so cute and fun. And I agreed that, yeah, she's right. And not that I necessarily would have done it, but I think that it was helpful to have someone say, hold on, I don't know you, but just take a minute, think about it before you do it. So that was helpful for me. You want to make sure that you know the genetics. Because if you put two things together that could end up having some kind of defect, that's not good. You want to know where the genetics of your crested gecko come from. So if you buy a crested gecko, a good breeder will be able to tell you what their lineage is. They could even give you pictures of their parents. I've asked for pictures of parents with my Chihuahua gecko to see what my Chihuahua might grow up to look like, and she looks just like her dad. So that was helpful to know, because they change a lot. Crested geckos, not so much, as far as they're changing throughout the years. But Chihuahuas, they start out very different from where they end up. So it's just helpful to know that when you're buying one. And I talked to a breeder when I was looking, because I saw this one that I really, really wanted. It was gold and black, and I was like, this is amazing, but it was way out of my price range. And I said, do you have anything similar? I'm just in love with this, but I just can't afford it. And she said, to be honest, they change so much. What you're seeing today might be totally different when they're an adult. And that's when I asked for the parents' pictures. And they said this one was actually related to the one that I ended up getting. And the one that I ended up getting had already started to change. And she ended up being this beautiful green and red Chihuahua gecko. But if I went in thinking I'm going to be getting a black gecko and it's going to stay black, I would have been really surprised and possibly disappointed. Now, I don't know, that other one might have grown up to be that way, but going into it knowing is helpful. So just things like that. Know the genetics. Do your research if you're really thinking about doing it. What different combinations you need to put together to get what the different morphs are, the different types are, depending on whatever kind of reptile you end up deciding that you want to breed. A side note about my feelings for crested geckos. I love my crested geckos. I think they're adorable and fun, but there's a lot of crested gecko breeders out there. So you're going to be competing for quality and price. And there's this huge many people are breeding them. I'm not saying don't do it, but I'm just saying be aware that, it's not necessarily going to be a money maker. And they all have different personalities. Menchie is more slow. She just kind of walks almost kind of like a Chihuahua in how slow she moves, just very calculated. Now, I had a gecko named Misa who was a beautiful gecko. Long story about how I got her, but she was a kind of gecko that when she jumped, you didn't know where she was going to jump and you didn't know exactly when. Sometimes she would sit there and she would have the look with the little curved toes and then launch herself. But unlike other geckos where they typically point in the direction, she would be pointing this way and fly off in another direction. So you wouldn't really necessarily know where she was going to go. And that was unfortunate. And then Cinnamon, he will just jump and boom, right into the glass of the enclosure. It's hilarious. Like, you'll walk into the room at night, like just thinking you're sneaking. Of course they can see, but he'll just bam right into the glass. And you know that if it's a thunk sound, it's probably him. Now, if you're considering breeding, think about why you want to breed. Do you want to breed because they're just so cute and they're lovely and you want more of them and they're so cute? If that's your reason, it might not be the right time, or maybe you shouldn't do it at all. But if it's something where you just are really passionate about reptiles and you would like to breed reptiles, there are other breeds too. I'm just saying because there's a lot of crested gecko breeders out there to maybe consider something else. There are some reptiles that are practically endangered, that yes, it would cost a bit to get into them, but if you're doing it for the sheer passion of, I love reptiles, I love the idea of conserving them, I love the idea of working with them, but understand that you might not break even. It might just be a passion project, but of course do it with education. Maybe consider something else, because there are a lot of reptiles that are in the trade that have a very small amount of people that are breeding them that frankly could use more. For example, pink-tongued skinks. I haven't looked recently, but at one point I was considering a pink-tongued skink and it was so hard to find a breeder. I could not find them. They were always in and out. And I had joined a Facebook group too that had breeders on it, and they would post theirs and it was gone. There was a breeder that I really wanted to work with. I was recommended by someone who I got my African fat tail from, and she ended up having to put her pink-tongued skink on an off season, just give her rest because she had a really rough year the previous year. So she was doing the right thing by the pet. So I thought, well, I'll wait for her because I know that she's a good breeder. I feel good about her. And she said she'd let me know when she had another clutch in the future. But I did not end up getting a pink-tongued skink. But that is just an example. But you're going to see a lot of things at shows like ball pythons. More lately, you'd see blue-tongued skinks. Crested geckos, lots of crested geckos. Leopard geckos, a lot of leopard geckos. So just be aware of the kind of animal that you might want to work with, and is there another one like it that isn't as common that might be the next big thing, and also might be doing a favor to the lineage. For example, axolotls, they're practically extinct in the wild. There's one pond there where they live in the wild, just one, and that's it. So if it weren't for the pet trade, at some point they would just be gone forever. So the people who are breeding them and people who are keeping them as pets, they're keeping them going. And that's one really awesome thing about being into these different types of animals. But of course, do it if you're passionate about it. Don't breed just because, oh, I think they're adorable. This one's adorable. This one's adorable. Let's put them together and we see what we get. That's just really irresponsible behavior. And it can really be bad for the animal. And then you have animals also that you're probably going to have to find homes for. So consider that as well. Just be aware that some animals can really hurt each other when they're breeding. If you have a crested gecko, most likely one of them or both of them will drop their tail. I have heard that Leachianus geckos like to kind of, they're very rough. The girl will kind of beat up the boy and see if basically they're strong enough for her. So they can really get hurt. And you might put two animals together that are typically pretty relaxed, but then they don't agree with each other and they're not a good match either. Some animals, they breed for life. So for example, Gidgee skinks are, from what I'm told, what I've heard, they are more of a family. So when a male and a female get together and they have babies, they all coexist. And well, they're, still family. But if you were to take that male and try to put him with another female, that would not go over well. So just kind of knowing what your species is about, do a ton of research before you do it. And while you're doing your research, you could certainly be raising them up from babies. Babies are going to be cheaper. You'll know what their personality is like. You'll know what their offspring might be like. So you'll be able to go in with a good knowledge of that when you do start breeding and when you're talking to people who might be interested in buying them. Now you need to decide what you're doing with the animals. Do you have the room for them? There's breeding racks you can get, but just be aware that they're going to get bigger and you'll need to either put them in a bigger enclosure or find them a home. And you might not find them a home. You might just need to get them a bigger enclosure until you do. So have a plan for what that's going to look like. Are you going to do expos? Is there a pet store that would want to take them to sell? Definitely try to figure these things out first and what you might want to do before you decide to go for it so that you're prepared. Be aware you're going to have costs. So you're going to need to get the proper food for them. What does that look like? Are you going to need fresh food? Like if it's a skink or a bearded dragon, you're going to need to have the right fresh food for them as well as insects. You might want to start a feeder colony. So you might want to breed dubia roaches or crickets or something else. Silkworms, which also can be a really great side business as well because silkworms are super good for reptiles. So you could have another thing that you're doing in addition to the breeding. Since you're breeding them, you want to have additional food. So those are just some other things that you might want to consider. Be prepared for what to do when the animals start coming. So if you're breeding, you're going to need to have enclosures for all the animals. They should have their own enclosure, and then they also might be put together either within that enclosure or another enclosure that you bring them together in just for the breeding portion, and then separate them again. Once that's happened, you'll want to have a spot to put the eggs so that they can incubate. So you'll have an incubator set up. You'll have little trays or containers for the eggs, the stuff that the eggs sit in. I think it's perlite. Again, I'm not a breeder. And then once the babies are born, you'll want to have baby bins. So whether that's a rack or something else, you'll want to be prepared for all of that. And then what you need to feed them. So some animals, they eat really tiny things when they're born. Well, a lot of them do, but something you have to figure out, that food might be very different to what you're used to. And what is that going to look like? Can you have the babies together or not? Should they all be separate? Should they have a couple of them together? Is that okay? Will that work? Will that actually help them? Just based on your species that you work with. So looking into all of that. So let's talk about genetic issues. I want to do a video all about genetics at some point. It's going to be something that will take a lot of time to research and put together because there's a lot of different genetic things out there. But just be aware that if you are going to breed, you want to know which genetics you put together are going to make what and what kind of issues those combinations might have. It might really look cool, but then it could be harmful to the pet. So there are some morphs of leopard geckos that can cause neurological issues. Some bearded dragon morphs can cause issues. Ball pythons. So there's a lot of things that can happen when you're breeding. So just make sure that you're doing that genetic research as well, while you're going upon your journey. When you're finding homes for your pets, are you going to talk to the person who's buying about, do they have the right setup? Do they have these things or that things? Are they familiar with the diet, stuff like that? Or are you just going to sell them and not have anything to do with the other side? So think about that. Personally, I really appreciate when a breeder is willing to answer my questions. Doing research is important too, but I like to ask questions about the animal's personality. When I got a snake, because I'm so used to lizards, and lizards are a lot more maintenance than snakes, I probably asked more questions than I should have, because I just was shocked how easy they are. I mean, snakes are really easy compared to lizards, and let alone bearded dragons. I love my bearded dragon, and he's so rewarding, and I would do anything that I need to for him to keep him healthy and happy, and thrive. But when you consider bearded dragon's maintenance to my hognose snake, I could just leave him in his bin and just change out his water and he would be happy, and that's fine. And obviously do his bedding changes. If I leave the room and I leave my house for too long and come back, my bearded dragon seems to miss me. Like he will perk up when he sees me. Like he cares. So yeah, so there's different things, and I appreciate when a breeder is willing to answer my questions and care about where their pet's going. If you do decide to do it, make sure that you put the health and welfare of the pets first. And be an ethical breeder. Do your research and make sure that you're doing it for the right reasons. And if you do that, I really think you'll be a great breeder. But just know that it's not going to make you tons of money. It's going to be something that you will do because you love it. And if you do it because you want to do it for a job, you're probably going to have to do something else as well. So just do it for the right reasons. And if you do, I think you'll be awesome. And who knows, maybe I'll buy a pet from you one day. We'll see. Thanks for stopping by. Bye.